show you a few more things. I've got about 20 more minutes, and then open it up to questions. And the third data set I want to show is PSAT. PSAT, you can get these data sets very easily. I get them by ordering the CD-ROM right from the College Board. It's very easy to do. And again, we're a small school, so you're not going to see a large data set. So you can see this is a much smaller data set because this is not multiple dots for each student. This is one dot per student, seeing the different components of PSAT. And it's not really useful to look at breakdowns because I have so few students. But there were some things that I really found interesting, and one of them is trying to look at the breakdowns. PSAT is quite nice, and they give you some of these skills needed. Anybody ever notice these? They give you these skills needed. Anybody see these on the printouts they give you? And I found these really neat. I found them to be something that a lot of people don't look at. And so I sat down with the English department and I said, I think we have some things to work on. And it was really quite nice. I don't know if you can read sideways, but this one says understanding main ideas in a reading passage. And it was very clear. It's all data-driven. The data comes directly from the College Board. I didn't have to do anything. And I never understand why they have 3 of these, but anyway, it seemed to have that. And being thorough, I don't know. That's pretty obvious to work on with all kids. And the third one was understanding sentences that deal with abstract ideas. So I said to the English department, I think you need to go and implement some things in your school to work on those particular areas. It's very easy. All you do is take the data, throw it in here, and look at trends. And I think it's a lot easier than looking at long printouts from the College Board. I did the same thing in mathematics. And this was interesting because this turned into a curriculum question in my school. I taught math for a while, as some of my former supervisors in the room can attest. And this was a curriculum problem. The College Board told me that these kids were weak in probability and statistics, and I went back to our curriculum coordinator, and sure enough, we didn't really have a good coverage of probability statistics. So I used data from the College Board and then brought that strand down and beefed it up. I said, we haven't done enough here. And I used data to show that information. Again, it's a very small data set. It's not really, no rational mathematician would draw hard conclusions with 9 data points there, but it definitely was a common thread. You can do all the standard statistics with PSAT, but again, there are so few students in my school that it's not terribly meaningful. But you can obviously look at, for example, these are the critical reading percentiles. But again, it's not very meaningful because our numbers are so small. But I just wanted to highlight that one element of the PSAT results because it's something that not everybody pays attention to with those recommendations from the College Board. And the last data set I want to show was sort of using the multiple measures idea. And this is really where I'm still working on trying to combine these things and started. And the one that I was working on was in our school, I know everybody implements it differently, but in our school, math goes 3 to 9. And then we do PSAT in 10 and 11, and then the IB in 12. That's sort of our sequence of standardized testing. Those are all very different tests that test very different things, but we didn't want to over-test the kids, and we have some very different measures going forward. But we did notice a gap between math ending at a grade 9 and PSAT going into grade 10. So somebody asked me the question, Scott, why is this happening to your students? And my answer was, I have no idea. But I need some data to go and work through it. So I did start to combine some measures. And my problem is, again, I have low data. So I actually asked a college, I actually posted a message on PrincipalNet. And I got one school to contribute and started to combine data. And I guess this is a little bit of a plug. If anybody else wants to contribute data and start looking at these kind of things, pooling our data together, I think that's what Brian's actually going to talk about in the next session on his dashboards. I think in Africa, in ASA region, I think people are pooling their data together as well. And so I'm going to show you what I've started so far. And I think this is just the beginning of looking at trends. So I renamed these students. This is AAIE's case, it's my school, and this is another school in the Middle East. And This is looking at PSAT and math. And what I was looking for, and again, these are not the same tests. I mean, MAP's reading test is not the same as the PSAT critical reading test, but I guess I was wondering if there was any correlation at all, because I wanted to see how can we get better PSAT scores moving forward. And so here are MAP reading scores. Again, these are percentiles here. And then I compared, and I had to go through, because international school, we had kids taking MAP, and then they went to Hong Kong, and then we had new kids coming in, so not all the students I could have matching up. And then I took PSAT critical reading here, and this is two international schools now, and I got this picture here. And I don't really have a lot of answers for you, but it's somewhat interesting. There's somewhat of a correlation here. A bit over the show. But again, are you comparing the same norms and whatever? No. This is not accuracy, but it definitely made me really wonder. I wanted to dig a little deeper and look at the curriculum standards in MAP and look at the curriculum standards in PSAT and find out where the weaknesses are. And that's really where I am right now in my data analysis. I don't have answers for you. But that's really where I am. But this was at least a starting point. And I did the same thing in mathematics. Here. And this is a little bit stronger correlation, which means the curricula are lining up a little better in math than they are in reading. I also looked at Lexile, which I thought was an interesting thing, and looking at Lexile versus reading as well.
So
yeah, go ahead.
I'm not sure how to interpret that. If they lined up, they should all go along.
Correct. But not precisely, but in general, one would think that the students who are ranking higher in a norm in the United States in math should do well also on the PSAT, in general, in broad brush strokes.
We did the writing sample. Our own writing sample gets 6 straights. And we did that with the writing from the SAT. And we overlaid them. And then we looked for trends. So
Exactly.
I think you can work exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
No problem.
And in broad brush strokes. Like that. If you correlate MAP Lexile and MAP reading, by the way, you get, I think, an exact correlation of MAP. I'm not an expert in MAP, but the Lexile is computed from the reading map, so that's not very interesting. It's a direct calculation. And that's really where I am as far as looking at data. I promised somebody that I would talk a little bit about IB, because I did mention it in the blurb. You can do this with IB. There's no problem. Again, my problem is that I don't have enough data. I have a very small school with I probably have a grand total of 10 IB scores. So I can't do anything yet. But you certainly can put in your IB scores, it's no problem. And one of the questions I saw hovering around PrincipleNet, which has been going on since I've been involved with IB, is predicted scores versus actual IB scores. And I think that would be a very neat thing. If somebody wants to go and plug that in and share, I think that would be very interesting. But that's a very common, when I taught IB diploma, that was always the big question, is how do those correlate? And you can certainly do it compared to anything else you want. You can compare your IB English scores versus your PSAT versus your MAP and so on and so forth. It really doesn't matter what you're comparing. It's just a tool. It's just a tool. Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Just in terms of exporting this, so it'll export out as an image so that you can put it into a report or use it for these.
Yeah. Copy as picture. And then it pastes into Word and so on. But to me, the main thing, and sometimes you got to put it in a report, you got to give it to somebody, but to me the main thing is actually use it as a dynamic tool rather than a static tool. But yeah, sometimes you do need to go and print them and so on. They don't print extremely well, because that was never its intent. But they do copy. I've used it and printed it and put it in reports and so on. Anybody else? Anyway, it's food for thought.